Hey, I'm Tracy Clark Flory.
I'm Amanda Monty. Welcome to Dire Straits.
Today, we're talking about monogamy, from its historical roots as a marital expectation for wives, but not for husbands, to its current role in exploiting women's unpaid sexual labor. It's clear that monogamy is a feminist problem.
Monogamy is also essential to the culture of heterosexuality. Today, we'll dig into how monogamy fuels toxic romance myths about soulmates, isolates love and care within the nuclear family, and shrinks our social and political lives.
But the task of solving these problems is, of course, much bigger than just opting into polyamory. So, we're also going to talk about what it might look like to be anti monogamy in ways that actually have nothing to do with who or how many people you're fucking.
Oh, okay. I'm on the edge of my seat. Before we jump in, a quick reminder that this is a paywalled episode, which means free listeners will have to upgrade to hear Tracy and I get candid about our experiences with monogamy, from experiences with infidelity to our current feelings about sexual exclusivity as a married woman. That's Tracy, and a newly divorced woman. That's me.
We've got some big, complex, and sometimes contradictory feelings on this topic. To hear those feelings, you can upgrade now at direstraitspod.com. That's Straits with a GH. You'll get access to all of our episodes without any paywalls, as well as special bonus content and subscriber chats. Paid subscribers, thank you so much for making this podcast possible. Okay, I want to open up with a question that maybe sounds stupid, but please humor me. What is monogamy?
What is monogamy? Okay, so the simplest definition is that monogamy is only having sex with one person or only having a romantic relationship with one person. So it could be while dating or with the expectation of a lifelong marriage. I guess I think of it mostly as a partnership with one person, usually in a long-term fashion, but I suppose that is up for discussion.
Yes, right. It's often understood to mean that you have an agreement of sexual exclusivity within a relationship. But few of us really choose monogamy, at least if you think of choice as something that you enter into freely.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, for most of us, when we're younger, we don't comprehensively reflect on our own desires, well, at all,
Mm-hmm.
but specifically on how we want to define our relationship. So it's like we're drafted into monogamy because it is the norm, it's expected.
Exactly. Yes. Which is why I open up with the question of what it is, because so often it's something that isn't really even seen.
Right. It's just that assumed subtext of love and commitment and marriage.
Exactly. It's often pretty invisible in terms of how it functions and what it's for and how it impacts our lives, both individually and collectively.
Or even like where it comes from, right? Like, how did we get to this place in history of thinking of monogamy as the most moral or good
Mm,
way to relationship? Please tell us.
yes. 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 I think it's important to look at how monogamy came to be what it is now. So I want to give us a very quick and dirty history lesson here. You can trace expectations of monogamy within marriage back to ancient Rome, but those were expectations of monogamy for wives. Throughout history, women have been strong armed into monogamy because of concerns around maintaining lines of inheritance and quote unquote bloodlines. But husbands have long been expected to have a little something on the side or a
Right.
lot of something on the side.
Right. Couple somethings. Yeah.
Yes. We should also keep in mind that the emergence of this idea of love being the main reason you marry is relatively recent. That showed up in the 18th century and really took hold in the 19th century. And even still, passion was thought of as extramarital.
Well, marriage researchers like Stephanie Kuntz also argue that while the 19th century introduced this idea of love into marriage, where, as you mentioned previously, it was property, bloodline, eugenics.
Yeah.
The 20th century introduced this idea of mutually good, lifelong sex within monogamous marriage to sort of flag our fifth shift episode.
Yes, yeah. And it wasn't until the 19th century that men were also expected to be monogamous in marriage. That is thousands of years of men being given the go-ahead to fuck around while their wives faced public shaming, torture, or death for doing the same. I feel like
Cool.
Yeah, I feel like the rest of this episode should just be an hour-long scream because, oh my God, like...
Yes. Well, and something tells me that in the 19th century and most of the 20th century, the husbands were also still not being faithful to their wives.
Right. Even with the expectation, the sort of like the expectation that you at least be maybe more subtle about it and attempt to hide it. Exactly.
Yeah. We've seen Mad Men. We know.
We know. Anyway, as Sophie K. Rosa points out in her amazing book, Radical Intimacy, the nuclear family and monogamous marriage was first the domain of the wealthy and then became a working class aspiration. Monogamous marriage became a way to distance oneself from the shame and deviancy associated with sex workers and queer people.
Right. Well, and importantly, as we discussed in our divorce plot episode, under, systems of enslavement, the enslaved were also not allowed to marry, which fed into racist stereotypes of hypersexualization, but also, of course, was a very intentional method for, dehumanizing people, keeping them from full citizenship, and, of course, attempting to destroy families and kinship.
Yes. And then, as the feminist scholar Sylvia Federici points out, the role of the housewife, the white housewife, emerged as a tool of capitalism. She was supposed to service, quote, the male worker physically, emotionally, and sexually, end quote.
Yeah, I remember that quote. That one stuck with me.
We'll never forget it. Yes.
Yes, right. Well, and so much of that transition to capitalism was about disciplining women's sexuality, which Federici writes about in Caliban and the Witch. And, women generally were being disciplined at this time because they were seen as a threat to capitalism. But also the norm of monogamous marriage really helped to support the exploitation of women's unpaid labor. The nuclear family became a foundational institution of capitalism as well. Whereas previously, so much of the work that we now think of as domestic was shared and communal.
Exactly.
So not the most promising history when it comes to monogamy, not the best start. We've got, gendered double standards, racial exclusion, the treatment of women as sexual property, as labor property. Since the 1950s male breadwinner model, the role of sex in marriage has also changed quite a bit, as we mentioned. If you did listen to our episode on sexual labor within marriage, you already know that women are now expected to do a disproportionate amount of sexual labor in marriages to keep those relationships intact, to keep the spark alive too, which often means denying their own sexual needs and wants to accommodate men's, as well as a lot of self-pathologization, consumerism, when women inevitably find that they're not attracted to their uninvolved husbands. So, you could argue that monogamy remains a key framework for supporting that exploitation of women's unpaid sexual labor.
Mm-hmm.
It helps reframe a lot of labor as love.
100%. And the coercions of monogamy are everywhere. It is a social norm. It is legally sanctioned and rewarded by the state via marriage. And it's deeply entwined with popular romantic hetero myths around the one. The tale of happily ever after includes the belief that one person will fulfill your every need sexually, romantically, emotionally, spiritually, and so on. That is the definition of romantic love.
Totally. So, like you said at the start, monogamy is not something that we can simply call a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's this narrative that we're really confronted with the moment that we're born and
Yeah.
repeatedly socialized to revere.
Yes. Which brings me to the idea of compulsory monogamy.
Which I think kind of jumps off of Adrienne Rich's theory of
Mm-hmm.
compulsory heterosexuality. So, Rich argued that heterosexuality is itself an institution of patriarchy, much as she argued motherhood was. And Rich wrote, this is a quote, that our failure to examine heterosexuality as an institution is like failing to admit that the economic system called capitalism or the caste system of racism is maintained by a variety of forces, including both physical violence and false consciousness.
Yes. And monogamy is similarly considered the norm. It's framed as healthy and morally correct. It's also institutionalized through everything from the legal contract of marriage to the preponderance of single family homes.
Right. I mean, it's also something that we tend to fail to examine just as a system of belief. Many of us don't ever question the role of monogamy in our lives. It's assumed. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you do question monogamy, it can be hard to tell whether it's truly something that you desire or something that, in another way, perhaps you've been strong armed into.
Totally. I want to return to this idea of monogamy as natural. By the way, if you are into the nitty gritty of this, especially the nitty gritty written through a queer feminist lens, I highly recommend Angela Wiley's Undoing Monogamy. It's so fascinating. But by reading that book, I learned that in early 20th century sexology, monogamy was cast as a matter of European superiority.
Mm-hmm.
This racist and colonialist view held that monogamy was more evolutionarily advanced. It was quote unquote civilized.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah, and also didn't like the Masters and Johnson studies mostly focus on married monogamous couples. So
Yes,
there was a
right.
lot of that sort of
Yes.
monogamous privileging in sexology.
Mm-hmm, totally.
Yeah. Which is funny because I bet that like none of the white men that made these claims or who were predominantly the sexologists of the day were monogamous. Just a
Right.
guess. Just a guess.
Not truly monogamous. Yes. Maybe on
Yes.
the surface presenting as. Yeah, right.
But more and more, I see casual critics claiming that monogamy is evolutionary, and even more so that there's like an evolutionary basis to monogamy's moral
Mm-hmm.
superiority, which
Yes.
feels suspect.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, there's this popular theory holding that two dedicated parents help to increase the chances of a baby's survival. One parent could protect the offspring while the other looked for food. Um,
Jesus.
and so that's like the supposed evolutionary basis for it. But when DNA testing came along, researchers found that a lot of so-called monogamous animal parents were actually caring for offspring that they were not genetically related to. And these animal dads also had offspring elsewhere. Scientists call this extra pair copulation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in response to this finding, scientists developed a distinction between social monogamy, which
Mm-hmm.
is basically two parents jointly caring for offspring, versus sexual monogamy, which is not fucking anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But when you see headlines about things like scientists discovering a quote unquote monogamy gene by studying prairie voles, I read in reading that book I mentioned earlier, I learned so much about prairie voles, which they're way more fascinating than you would ever expect.
Wow.
But these studies finding things like a monogamy gene, they are actually referring to social monogamy, not sexual monogamy.
Interesting. That makes sense, but it just makes me think of all of the ways that we see this evolutionary biology stuff show up,
Mm-hmm.
which is, we take a sort of like historical tidbit, or we take, something that's happening in the animal kingdom and just map our like super gendered, super patriarchal myths onto it,
Yes.
right? And we're seeing all these ways in which now like that stuff is just being debunked left and right.
Yeah.
Even the story of, conception, right, which is often framed as like, all the little sperms battling it
Yep.
out. And now we know that that's not true. So I just always feel very suspicious of all that
Mm-hmm.
evolutionary biology
Oh, yeah.
stuff. In general, it does seem like there is still a really deep cultural investment in seeing sexual monogamy and maybe even social monogamy as natural. So
Yeah.
people don't seem to be really paying attention to the scientific nuances, right? Or even
No.
some of these more critical questions about certain disciplines and how they may have a kind of inherited or unconscious bias.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's often seems to be the problem with these evolutionary biology perspectives on gender relations, right? They also, of course, vastly ignore cultural and political influences, changeability,
Mm-hmm.
and their own internal biases in that regard.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. I think the intentions are often not pure in terms when it comes to interpreting these kinds of studies, right? Like the bias runs so very deep. I want to play devil's advocate for a moment. What is so bad about monogamy aside from, the compulsory aspect, which is a big thing to set aside. But is this social system really so bad? I thought that maybe we could try to quickly breeze through our main objections, politically speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I appreciate that because yeah, why is it so bad?
What's so
Let's
bad about
discuss.
monogamy,
Yes.
really? Okay, I'll go first. I would say monogamy serves the exploitative patriarchal family model.
I mean, that's a good one,
Right? That's
Tracy.
a big one. It's been used to control women's bodies and sexuality for millennia. That's a pretty big one.
Yeah, I mean, I especially like when you're going over the history of like who is actually held to the standard of monogamy, right? The sort of
Mm-hmm.
gendered double standards of monogamous marriage in particular
Yep.
has always favored men doing whatever they want.
Many feminists have pointed out that within our culture, monogamy is sort of sold to women as a form of safety.
Hmm.
That essentially by committing to a man via marriage and monogamy, that you can gain protection, um, particularly within rape culture, that you can gain protection from other men. Essentially, there's this academic Annie S. Murray who has this quote: by allowing one man full access to her body, a woman can obtain his protection from other men. Of course, that's like not like literally it, like, does it truly function as protection
Does it work?
always? Does it actually work? No, but the point being that women are sold this exchange that,
Right.
like, if you commit to one man, you will be safer.
Yes. I mean, I actually see that very colloquially coming up among married women who talk about staying in their,
Mm.
unhappy or sort of mid marriages
Hmm.
because the dating scene seems so bleak. So there's kind
Yeah.
of that sentiment of like, well, at least I'm like safer here,
Yeah.
which always gets my wheels turning of like, but are you enjoying having sex with this person that you're married to that you seem like you kind of want to get away from, but
Right.
So all these other questions come up then in terms of, well, what are you forcing yourself to do within that monogamous relationship because of the fear of going elsewhere?
Right. Right.
Or that perception of safety and comfort.
Yes. Yes. Right. What is exchanged for that perception of safety or comfort? Yeah.
So a lot of people have argued that monogamy can also be a way to control other people, to try to assert ownership over them. Obviously, we see this come up in marriage, but Dean Spade writes a lot about this,
Mm-hmm.
in Love in a Fucked Up World, which we've mentioned a couple times on the podcast, the possessiveness that comes
Yeah.
into monogamy. Others have also argued that not just marriage, but monogamy privatizes love and care,
Yeah.
by making it sort of exclusive to that
Yes.
smaller family or relationship system.
Mm-hmm. Totally. It positions the security of love and care and home opposite sexual expression and exploration also.
That's interesting. The opposition,
Yes.
right? Like if you can privatize love and care and sex and keep it within the private domain, it's not out there in the public,
Mm-hmm.
on the market,
Yeah.
which is so dangerous and scary, right? At least in this sort of formulation or in this like
Right.
vision of relationships.
Right.
Obviously, we've seen a lot of single women today, rejecting relationships because they are arguing that, heterosexual monogamous relationships with men emphasize romantic and coupled love over friendship love.
Yes.
And often that
Yes.
means other, women or, people that you might otherwise have relationships with. And then, of course, monogamy is a key part of the romance mythology that
Yeah.
pushes women to center men.
Yeah, and I would add too, like it undermines broader social ties, like speaking to that idea of centering the couple or centering men, centering romance over friendship love. Again, I want to call back to Sophie K. Rosa, who has this great quote. The prioritization of the couple form might involve a shrinking not only of the self, but also of more expansive intimacies and therefore solidarities. So to
Well,
me, that's one of the major sort of dings against monogamy is the way that
mhm.
it makes our worlds contract.
Right. Well, this is also making me think of what we've discussed in a couple episodes in terms of how marriage is about the elimination of risk. And so
Yeah.
when you're eliminating all risk to your relationship, you are inevitably going to be eliminating certain intimacies, possibly
Mm-hmm.
even other full relationships. We also just did an episode on, married and single women and the sort of tensions between them.
Yeah.
And something we talked a lot about is how centering your husband, centering, the nuclear family makes it a lot harder to have more expansive friendships and
Mm-hmm.
relationships with
Right.
other people.
Yeah, and included in that is this idea that men and women can't be friends. Like that's one of the dictates of
Right.
monogamous culture. Like, it requires us to shrink our worlds. Even emotional intimacy is considered risky for,
Yeah.
straight married people. I am very aware of the fact that the reason I don't have close male friends is because of monogamy culture, which says that it's inappropriate to hang out with a straight man platonically, and also that it's dangerous. It's inappropriate and dangerous. It poses a threat. Monogamy culture also can make us feel bad or abnormal if we experience attraction to other people while in a committed monogamous relationship, right? Which is totally absurd. I mean, it's nonsense, right? But it's part of that romance myth of one person fulfilling all of your needs to the point of like not even being able to register that other people are attractive.
Totally. Well, right. It's like the soulmate thing. It's the twin flame, the one true love myth. But it's making me think of, what you said about like the threats to the family. And so much of that narrative, of the other woman, the other man, like that is
Yeah.
so central to that larger fairy tale story of finding the one who
Yeah.
would never look elsewhere
Right. Right.
for anything ever.
Yes. So I want to shift now to the personal. Let's get into it. What stories did you grow up with around monogamy?
Okay. So, where do I even start?
Oh no, you've hit the paywall, but there is so much left to this episode. We get super candid, super honest about our own experiences with monogamy. We talk about the monogamous myths that we grew up with in our families and in the toxic hetero ephemera of pop culture. We also talk about our current feelings about this idea of sexual exclusivity. I get into my experiences with monogamy as a married woman, and I ask Amanda how she's feeling about monogamy as a newly divorced woman. You don't want to miss it. Like, actually, it is so good. You can upgrade to paid at direstraitspod.com. That's straights with a GH. You will get full access to all of our episodes, no paywalls ever, along with bonus content and our subscriber community on Substack. If you haven't joined us on Substack, you are missing out on the full Dire Straits experience. Again, direstraitspod.com. Upgrading to paid also helps make this podcast possible, and you'll be supporting a feminist podcast that is critiquing monogamy in this era of trad wife propaganda and right-wing pro-family bullshit. If you want this podcast to continue to grow and thrive, we do need your support.